Hello there, the voices of the Vic. My name is Graham Falk. I am the host of Sunderland podcast, What the Falk Podcast, and I've been asked by Mike just to give a little bit of a summary of our season so far, a little bit of last season and predictions and whatnot. So just going to go through that as best as I possibly can. I've been asked by Mike first and foremost to sum up last season. In a word, it's hard. Fantastic in many ways because obviously winning at Wembley was amazing. Actually getting through the playoffs and finally getting out of League One was something that we've wanted to do for 4 years, and it would be a completely different podcast and longer answer if you ask me what the 4 seasons were like in League One. Draining. There was a big worry that for me personally we weren't going to get there with Lee Johnson, although when he was sacked we were third in the table. There's a lot more behind it than that, and obviously the fact that Alex Neil came in and got us promoted and I think lost 1 in 18 I think or 19 potentially to get us up through the playoffs proves that was the right decision to move Lee Johnson on and bring in Alex Neil. But more on that later with Alex Neil. But I think ultimately when I look back on last season, one of my favourites because of how it ended. There's been a lot of heartache with Sunderland at Wembley specifically, let alone the football club, and that day at Wembley was just fantastic and something that'll live with me forever. The minute that Ross Stewart's foot got the ball and he put it in the bottom corner past David Stockdale to kind of let us know we'd done it, 2-0 up with 10 minutes to go. Close to 50,000 Sunderland fans. It was just unbelievable. In short, just fantastic. And I would love to do it again. But, whether we ever will, I don't know. But we did that day and it was fantastic. The aims for this season, the mantra for me, I think I've said for a long time and said in my own preview podcast with Mike that 15th would be fine. There's no problem with 15th for me. I think, the difference between League One and the Championship, you're never really too sure how big it is. But I'm telling you, it's really different. There's a lot more quality in this league. We've come up against some really good teams, and if we could finish 15th, that's fab. That's progress, and we are a work in progress at the moment. That's had a lot of bad years in League One, and prior to that, a double relegation. So we understand that it's going to take time as fans. But then on the flip side, we're currently sitting 6th in the league. We've never been out of any game. We've only lost to Middlesbrough, which was probably our poorest performance of the season. And also we lost Ross Stewart literally 8 minutes before kickoff. So there's reason behind that. We got beat 2-1 at Sheffield United. We were probably the better team up until a red card on about 30 minutes and still nearly grabbed the point. And we were the better team against Norwich and unfortunately hit the crossbar twice and got beat 1-0. And they're the only games we sort of lost. Looking at the other games, QPR, we were 2-0 up with 3 minutes to go, and then a goalkeeper scores a diving header and they score a superb free kick with their first shot on target. And the Coventry game's an absolute screamer from Gyökeres to pull it back to 1-1. So, I don't know. I said, when you get 12 games, you'll understand sort of how the league's going to go. And I think when you look at the table, taking something out of the equation, most clubs are in the position that I thought they probably would be, give or take 1 or 2 exceptions. So the fact that we're 6th, maybe we can make a push, and maybe the fact that some people have seen us as dark horses and some people said the momentum might carry us might actually do something. But like I say, aims for this season for me was just safety. 15th would be fine. Top 10, 11th, 12th would be fantastic. But as long as we're just in this division by the end of it. The signings we've made this season, a lot of the players we brought in were players that were on loan last season and then signed permanently. I think going through the signings we made, I think the most money we spent on a player was, although it was undisclosed, I think we spent around 2 million on Dan Ballard, who came in from Arsenal, spent last season on loan at Millwall. He looked great, but unfortunately broke his foot 3 games in, so he's going to be out till about December time, and maybe after the World Cup is when we'll see him. But he looked good up until then. Outside of that, we signed Jack Clark on a permanent deal, who's been fantastic. He's been one of our best players this season. I think, and I'm sure people will have seen the goal that we scored. He finished off anyway against Reading, and probably one of the goals of the season and one of the best goals I've ever seen Sunderland score, if I'm completely honest. It's been all over Twitter, so I don't need to explain that to you, I'm sure. We've brought in 4 players on transfer deadline day, which was Amad Diallo from Manchester United on loan, Michoud, who is on loan from Paris Saint-Germain, very highly rated, played 8 games for PSG. We also brought in Jewison Benete, who's an 18-year-old teenager from Costa Rica. He came off the bench on Wednesday and looked absolutely rapid. And then we also brought in a player called Bar from Le Havre, I think the pronunciation is correct. Sunderland's recruitment model, agree with it or disagree with it, is to bring in young players under the age of 24, get them to do a job here, and then move on further forward. And a lot of our recruitments mirrored that, and I think that was probably one of the big reasons that Alex Neil decided to go to Stoke, because I think he wanted a bit more experience in there. But the proof's in the pudding. The signings we've made have improved the team, and at the time of speaking, we're 6th off top in the league, so you can't really argue about it. Ellis Sims is another person that's came in on loan, started like an absolute train, scored 2 on his debut, then scored again against QPR. He hasn't scored since, and I do think he's going to be out on Saturday. The big thing about Saturday's game is that we actually have no strikers, and that's the frustration for me from the recruitment perspective, is that everyone's seen that we needed strikers. We play with 2 up top, and Ross Stewart's out for 12 weeks, maximum, 8 weeks minimum, and it looks like Ellis Sims damaged his toe, whether that's broken or just bruised. I don't think we'll see him on Saturday, which effectively leaves us with no strikers, because we've only got 2 and we play with the 2, which was, in my opinion, very short-sighted. But going into the game on Saturday, we actually played with no strikers and about 8 midfielders on Wednesday and won 3-0, but I don't think it's going to be a case where we can put that performance in every week. So signings have been good. We are short in a few areas now because of injuries. In terms of the standout signing though, because I've been asked to choose one, Jack Clark, although technically we had him last season, the fact that we've got him now permanently, I've got to pick Jack Clark. He's been one of our best players this season. He's got 3 goals, he's got numerous assists, I don't know how many exactly, but he's got a lot, and he's just been really, really good, really exciting, and looks like the player that Leeds had a few years ago that Spurs wanted to spend £10 million on. So in terms of the standout player, Jack Clark's really up there, but I've got to pick Ross Stewart as our standout player for this season, but unfortunately he's injured, so I'll try and give you a player that I think's been our standout sort of this season, because most of them are injured at the moment. Dennis Serkin's also injured. Like, our best 3 players have been Dennis Serkin, Jack Clark and Ross Stewart, if I'm honest. So I've mentioned Jack Clark, so I'll give you another player, Danny Bart, who's our centre-half. He's been quietly superb. He sits in the middle of a back 3 and he's just consistently good. He's just in every way, shape, as a former Championship centre-half. We signed him from Stoke last year in January. He got in the team and then he scored an own goal and he got injured, and we thought, what we signed here. He came back in towards the end of the playoffs and played in the back of a sort of 3 and sometimes a 4 with Bailey Wright, and he's been an ever-present this season. And his experience, his ability, his strength and his leadership has just been massive, and I think he's not an underappreciated player, but a player that does so much so well that you almost don't recognise how good he is sometimes. So because I've mentioned Jack Clark and Ross Stewart and Dennis Serkin are injured, I'll say Danny Bart, but they're all playing quite well at the moment. Obviously Patrick Roberts scored 2 goals on Saturday as well, so there's another mention for him as well. The player that catches my eye for Watford, I think he's going to be out, but Ismail Assar obviously is a player that I've got to be honest, and I wasn't 100% sure if he would stay with you when you got relegated down, but I think we all seen how good of a player he was. I would normally say Ben Foster, but obviously he's retired and now left. He caught my eye for some interesting YouTube videos, interesting being the prevalent word there, but I've got to say Ismail Assar. He looked like he could cope in the Premier League, so the fact that you've got him in the Championship, but I hear that he might be injured, so that's probably a huge positive for us. So if he's injured, I'm going to go Tom Cleverley. I think he's one of those players that for some reason throughout his career has been sort of ridiculed, but is actually quite a good player. Just because he didn't quite do it for Manchester United doesn't mean he's not a good player. Obviously played for Everton as well. He's been at Watford for a few years now, and I think especially for the Championship and the top half of the Championship, he's probably one of the best players that you could potentially have. I mean, as far as I remember, he's an England cap. He might not be now, but you've got to kind of give him credit for that. And I think at this level, he's a name that sticks out an absolute mile out. But if Ismail Assar is fit, then obviously that's who I would pick, if not Tom Cleverley. Score prediction, I said Watford would beat us 2-1 on my preview show, but we recorded on the Tuesday before Watford's game at Blackburn and before our game at Reading. Am I going to stick with it, or am I going to change it? Well, this season, whenever we've come up against teams that are tipped to be automatically promoted, we'll include Middlesbrough in that, even though they're in 20th at the moment, they were tipped for automatic promotion. We've unfortunately not quite had enough. But I know Watford is struggling a little bit at the moment. Obviously, I seen your goalkeeper having a discussion or an argument or whatever it was with some of your fans after the Blackburn game, and obviously it seems a bit fractured at the moment currently. But you're still a good side, and I still think you'll be up and around the playoffs at least minimum come the end of the season. So it's a difficult game considering we're probably going to have no strikers. But I might change it after the game the Wednesday, and I think potentially a draw. I think maybe a 1-1.